weekend, we've got a brand new Expendables film. So it's time to stop and rank all 4 Expendables films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of all 4 Expendables films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And let's get started. Without question, easily coming in last place is the Expendables 4. And I felt like this movie completely dropped the ball on delivering the experience that I want from an Expendables film. And what I mean by that is I go to these movies for old school action, and we're even pulling stars of the 80s, 90s, zeros, teens, all together in these big team up movies, but in an old school action style. And the big issue with this film is all of it just feels so fabricated. Whether you're talking about how they're on sets that are clearly green screened, or how many action sequences have a car drive by and then it cuts to this shockingly bad shot of one of the main actors in the film on a green screen holding a 50 cal firing it. But it all feels so inauthentic. Even the types of cameras they look like feel like the cheap cameras that like television uses to be clear and bright, but that's the problem. It's too bright. The way it picks up colors, it just doesn't look cinematic at all. And the VFX look terrible in a way that's inexcusable for a movie that costs $100 million and has all of these stars in it. Beyond that, this is the weakest lineup of the actual Expendables themselves. The star power, the characters just aren't very good. And then the story itself, was very disappointing in how it's handled. Just a very kind of clunky, awkward, convoluted story that finds an excuse to separate Jason Statham from everyone else that doesn't make a lot of sense. The tone is all over the place, where it'll play a scene that's supposed to be very serious and then cut immediately to a scene that is joking. And then they'll intertwine them sometimes of like people being snarky in regards to something that has emotional weight to it. And you're like, these don't even feel like people. So a movie that I was hoping could kind of bring us back to be some sort of throwback action film, pull us back to something like we saw in some of the previous films in the franchise. But that is not what this movie was for me. It was a massive disappointment that didn't really work on any level. Huge jump up in quality for me, The Expendables 3. Now, at the time this movie came out, it was a pretty big disappointment because they went for a PG-13 rating, and the way they marketed the film was basically like, look who we got, look who we got. And they got everybody in this movie. They got Wesley Snipes, they got Harrison Ford, plus everybody returned, plus some new people. We got Ronda Rousey in there, and at the time, an unknown Glen Powell. So it's kind of fun to rewatch this one and be like, that's Glen Powell right there. Then when you watch the movie, the way it plays out is you get an opening scene with your favorite Expendables, like, oh, cool, this is going to be amazing. And then they sideline them for the next hour of the film while we go off with the new Expendables. And it's just kind of a real disappointing way to structure things. And then you get a big slam bang finale. Another nice touch in here, Mel Gibson plays for a great villain, just so menacing. They give him a motivation that's a little bit more compelling than the other villains in this franchise. And so he kind of comes off really terrifying. So rewatching it, and in particular, thinking about it in contrast with Expendables 4, where I go, this can go so much worse. I think it does have a lot to offer. It is a nice touch that Glen Powell turned into be such a big star, but they kind of wasted. I mean, I guess it's not even wasted. They oversold the movie by just trying to get so many names on the poster that you can't possibly deliver on that in a satisfying way. So it just feels like a whole bunch of cameos. No one has enough screen time to be fully developed or feel like a satisfying version of them being in the film. And so a perfect example of when a team up gets too big for its own good and kind of crumbles under its own weight. But I still think this is enjoyable. So I overstated that a little bit once again, especially when I've seen 4, where it can get much worse than this, this is still a solid action film that delivers what I want from this franchise, just not as satisfying as it should be. But the Expendables 2, to be perfectly honest, Expendables 1 and 2 are pretty close for me. There's things in each of them that I'm like, oh, I really like that about this film. So when it comes to the Expendables 2, some nice touches in here is that you actually get Arnold and Bruce Willis in on the action. They aren't just cameos. They're a part of the story. And when the first movie came out, Arnold was still the governor. And so by the time this one came out, he was trying to relaunch his movie career. And so you actually get him in action with machine guns, doing all of the cool stuff that you want. Another fun detail on this one, you have Van Damme as the villain. He's not in the movie enough. That's pretty disappointing that they didn't have more to do with him. Likewise, he's there with Scott Adkins, so it's like 2 awesome martial arts stars, one of this era, and then, of course, Van Damme from the 80s and 90s. Great to see him in the movie, but I wish they'd given him more screen time, fleshed him out a little bit more, and given him, just more fun with Van Damme as this villain that's just merciless. But great to see him, and he still was able to do the split kicks in there a couple of times. And then this one had the nice touch of being a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. And so, Chuck Norris shows up and makes some Chuck Norris jokes. Arnold loves to quote himself. And so you get the one-liners and kind of playing into the self-awareness of everything kind of going on with this franchise. So that makes for a lot of fun. I think that a little bit also kind of hurts the film for me, because instead of the movie just being and embracing itself, it is a little bit like winking at the audience and depending on that a little bit too much. And I don't find the setting and the way the story kind of plays out is interesting. Like, they're in this murky environment where it's always overcast and it's very kind of drab, in which case a lot of things aren't as memorable. The sequences kind of blend together. And I just wish that it was in a better location that was just a more, lively spot. Like, the first one just feels like it's like this fun, bright island. And this one is just like murky villages and stuff. And I know a lot of that's budgetary, that there's certain countries you can go to and film and blow stuff up real cheap. And that's what they did. And it was overcast when they shot the film. But I do think that just kind of hurts the overall vibe and aesthetic of the film. But like I said, with being able to pull in Willis and just have and Schwarzenegger for this big slam bang finale and letting everybody shine at the end of it. Oh yeah, we have a Hemsworth in here too for a little bit. And even if it's just a little bit of screen time, those Hemsworth have enough screen presence that he leaves a mark when he don't want to spoil things just in case, but the way things play out with his character, you really care about the journey that he's on and the goods, the bads of it. So like this one and the first one, very solid films for me. But coming in first for me will be the original Expendables. And for me, I think that this movie was the best example of them doing what they set out to do, which is to say, it's not trying to reinvent the action genre. It's not trying to transcend it. It's just this idea of like, hey, what if we got everybody together? Let's get the guys from the 80s and 90s and then Jason Statham of today and do this big team up action movie. It's trying to be like one of those movies, but with the cast you always wish that we could have had back in the day. And I think it delivers that. This feels like a movie that could have come out back in 1990, and they're out in real planes, not jets, but real planes. I don't know if that was Statham actually popping out of the top of the jet or whatever, or I keep saying jet, out of the plane, firing the gun. I don't know what kind of plane it was. All I know is he was in this jumbo plane firing a gun out of the top of it, and it feels real. They're in a real location doing old school explosions. Stallone, broke his back or neck or something like that making this movie, because even though he was in his 60s, he was still scrapping it up, fighting these guys, fell on some rocks and got injured. And you get to the latest one and they're not doing that. None of it has that just kind of old school, yeah, we're going to get in there, we're going to fight, and they get thrown on some rocks and stuff. It doesn't have that vibe to it. And so even though Schwarzenegger and Willis were just kind of cameos in it, They were really fun cameos. It was fun to like, wait, they're on screen together. They're playing around. That's cool. And then our team that we did have, it was great to see them. Like Statham and Stallone are real fun on screen. Of course, Lundgren has a long history. Throw Jet Li into the mix. Even like Charisma Carpenter as the girlfriend in there. I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, so seeing her in there, nice little touch. So for me, this is the one that captured it the best. There's a few things in Expendables 2 that I think they did a little bit better and they made some improvements, but this is the one that I go back to the most and I think captures the magic. Maybe some of that's simply the novelty of it. Maybe that this one went for the R rating and right out of the gate, they're blowing heads off and everything like that. But for me, the original is still the best. It comes in at number 1. If you like this video, I've got other rankings of action franchises. You can check them out right over there in that playlist. I'm a big fan of throwback action movies, or before they were called throwback action movies, they were just action movies. That's the stuff I grew up on. So there's some of my rankings of all of that right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.